Welcome. Today we're going to talk building a greenhouse. We started on this greenhouse just a couple of days ago, so we're going to talk materials and walk through the process as we go from start to finish. We debated different greenhouse options. Do we go with the Harbor Freight greenhouse that's about $500–600? Do we build from scratch? Do we do something and cover it with plastic? And really decided that to get the most attractive greenhouse and something that would last a long time, we would go from scratch. So far the framing is done with treated 4x4s at the corners, in the ground, supporting 2x6s. We're going to frame most of it with 2x6s that will give it more support, because it won't have the frequency of studs like traditional framing where you put it every 18 inches with 2x4s. 2x6s will give it more support. We're going to go with old wood windows. We were able to find these windows at a salvage place for fairly inexpensive, and we hope that they do a good job even though they're old. We'll be doing a lot of scraping of the paint and a little bit of puzzle piece fitting to get them to fit exactly where we need them to in the frame of the greenhouse. This side here is mostly south facing. It's the largest side of the greenhouse, so it's going to be solid windows from top to bottom. It's about 10 feet tall at the peak, coming down to about 9 feet at the front, and then about 8 feet at the back, with an overhang for some tools, lawnmower, things like that at the back. I was able to find a lot of the 2x6s from somebody on Craigslist that made buying all the lumber much less expensive, but some of it is kind of rough looking. These rafter hangers that are supporting attaching all the rafters are absolutely a giant help and make the roof much stronger. So I'd absolutely recommend doing that if you're building very much of a roof on a greenhouse. So it has taken a few days to get some of this together, mostly because we've been held up by a lot of rain. But we're starting to get the roof together as well as some of the sides. Just for a little variety on both sides where the sun doesn't shine as much, we've come up a little over 3 feet, and this is reclaimed pallet wood on both sides. That'll be urethaned to cause it to last a little bit longer because it's not treated wood. And I like the look of the variety of wood there on the outside. Just creates an interesting look. You can see along the back here we finished up this overhang. We've created it in such a way that it doesn't really need supports back here, and it just creates some space to store some tools, some lawnmower, stuff like that. The solid roof comes up to the peak, and then on the front is corrugated plastic. We've started to put a couple pieces up there, but we'll be finishing that up within the next few days and making sure that that's well attached. The back of the greenhouse is going to be solid since the sun doesn't really shine much on that side, and it does face a wooded area. So it's framed and then sheathed with OSB on the outside. Used OSB because it is the cheapest material we can do that with, and we'll just give it a coat of paint on the outside, maybe paint something that is not real obtrusive. You can see the roof on the inside the OSB sheathing, and we framed it up with a lot of support because that is going to be shingled and needs to be strong enough to hold the weight of the roof, as well as somebody running around up there and banging on shingles. From here you can see what will be the door opening and the small section that is done with pallet wood there on the outside. So the greenhouse is coming along. We now have quite a few windows installed. You can see that these windows were just installed into the 2x6s. So I framed around the size of the windows. The windows were often a little bit different in size, so some of them I cut down the edges with a table saw just to make them fit the openings. You can see the openings are still not completely even with all of the windows, so there'll be a fair amount of covering some of that with some other wood, as well as filling in gaps with foam or with caulk. The windows on this side were similar to those on the front, although I did attach them to a brace going across from the inside and then just attach them to the board underneath them at the bottom. The corrugated plastic on the front part of the roof is all installed. This was a little bit difficult to install. It's not a very big area, but these pieces of corrugated plastic are just barely over 2 feet wide each, and so they have to be attached, and they have to have silicone caulk run between them to make sure they don't leak. They have some special screws to attach, and you can just barely see along that back edge there is some kind of foam filler that's used underneath them. It's strips that you buy that are fairly inexpensive, and they're ridged to match the shape of the plastic to keep any rain or also air from getting underneath. Along the front edges, we couldn't use that ridged foam, so we'll have to go all along the edge and use spray foam insulation to fill in all the gaps. You can see that much of the greenhouse is now white. This is just a primer coat, so if you look closely you can actually see through a fair amount of the paint. A lot of it's going to be blue. This primer coat, when we're painting bare wood, you really need to have a primer because it keeps the next coat of paint, which is going to be the final coat, from soaking in and being transparent. We did a lot of caulking, a fair amount of wood filler in different areas, and it still looks a little bit sloppy, especially those places where there's angled boards at the top. Hopefully the blue paint will disguise a little bit of that and improve the look. But it is made out of old windows, so we're never going to be perfect. On this side you can see the beginning of the blue paint. It's a very dark blue. You can see that the bottom isn't painted at all. This is the sections that are made of old pallet wood, just to give it a kind of different and rustic look. That part is going to stay wood. We are going to go over it with urethane just to seal and protect the wood and keep it from rotting over time. We are doing a small amount of electricity inside. The electricity has been run underground from the shed next door, which has a panel box, and over to the greenhouse. What you can see here is the outlet receptacle for inside. Above it, the outlet receptacle going outside. Above that, the switch, which will control lights, and the wire going up, going to the fan, and then there'll be another wire going up to ceiling lights. Simple electricity. It's just going to run on a 30 amp breaker. We don't need a lot in here. We may have a space heater at some point, sometimes during colder months, but that will probably be the largest electrical pull that we have. We have some hanging lights that aren't fully adjusted here. The fan will be attached to a thermostat, which will cause it to go on when the temperature becomes too high. So the greenhouse is coming along. Today I'm working on the floor. Took some time to smooth it out, had to remove some large roots that were in the ground that were coming through. So what I'm going to do is cover it with landscaping fabric, which is inexpensive black fabric that allows the water to go through, but is supposed to hinder weeds from coming through as much as possible. So this will go down under some sand, so there'll be some sand that goes on top of it, and then landscaping pavers. I have actually a pretty large amount of kind of pieces and broken landscaping pavers that I got for free that hopefully will cover the entire floor and will make it look interesting. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the tools that have been really valuable for this project. You really can't do a greenhouse this large without tools that really do the trick. This is a table saw. Table saw isn't really completely necessary, although it's been very valuable for cutting down the edges of windows. A lot of windows have had to be cut down half an inch, inch and a half on the sides to get rid of some of the edge that I don't want, as well as just to trim them and make them fit the right spaces. It's also been very valuable for ripping long boards that have to be cut down couple inches, cutting boards 2x4s or something at a slight angle. So that's been real helpful and valuable. You can do most of what you can do with a table saw with a circular saw, but the table saw makes it easier. Some other tools that you just can't live without. I got a couple hammers here. One's a big 22-ounce hammer that's really great for if you're just doing a lot of nailing nails and a lot of carpentry work. Don't really have to have the big hammer. The smaller 16-ounce hammer does a perfectly good job. The big one just makes it a little quicker and easier when you're doing a lot of nailing. The drill and impact driver are really can't do it without them kind of tools. These are not the same thing. A drill is just a constant spin, basically. Drilling holes. You can screw screws with a drill. Does a perfectly good job. The impact driver, though, is made for driving screws, and it actually impacts, meaning it gives a little extra bang as it goes around and makes driving screws so much easier. Got to have the caulk gun. So far I am almost done with caulking for this whole project, but I've gone through 10 or 12 tubes of caulk. Always going to take more caulk than you expect. When you are marking things, the tools that are really helpful are going to be the speed square. The speed square enables you to lay it right on the side of a board and mark a perfectly square, straight line very quickly. Also allows you to do small, quick measurements. Pencil. Over here is a level. Level is a must for making sure that everything is just straight the way it should be. Some ear protection, always good when you use power tools. Tape measure, gotta have a tape measure. Can't live without it. The blue tool here is a string marker. It draws a chalk line. Pull the string out. So this is meant for making long straight lines. Most effective on this project in marking straight lines across the roof in order to lay the shingles. The saw with a long blade right here is a power hacksaw. It's actually a metal cutting blade that's on there. I didn't really use this for cutting metal. I used it for cutting off the after using spray foam insulation to fill a lot of holes and gaps. This was really effective to cut off the parts of the insulation that bulged out that need to be gotten rid of. A lot of people will use a knife. Some people will use a bread knife or even just the blade off this tool handheld when there's a lot of work to do. The power tool makes it easy. Don't have to have it, but it makes it quick. Circular saw, a must. This is a cordless circular saw. You can certainly use a corded one. Doesn't have to be battery powered. But the circular saw, I use a finishing blade on it, which cuts a little bit slower, but it gives a smoother cut. You can use... So the roof of the greenhouse is now finished. It's not real pretty looking. This is roll roofing. I decided to use roll roofing rather than shingles, mostly because this is so much easier. I really didn't want to crawl around on the roof. Kind of makes me uncomfortable working up here so high, and it's just a tedious process doing shingles. The roll roofing is made of the same stuff. It's asphalt, but it's just a big roll, so you can cut pieces. Still have to put down tar paper underneath or roofing felt, and then you can just roll the asphalt roll roofing all the way across, do a couple layers, and then at the very top, at the peak, I did have to do shingles, just mostly because it was a small area, and you can see it from the house side. So I actually wanted it to match the roof on the house because it just looks a little bit better in the yard when you can see both at one time. Some instructions say that the roofing nails need to be sealed either with tar or some kind of roofing sealant. I have not had any leaking at this point and have had most of this on for a couple of weeks. So I'll keep an eye on that. I'm not really concerned about a little bit of leaking because a little bit of water coming through is not a real big deal. But if I start to see a lot of drips, I'll come up here with some tubes of sealant, just go hit each nail head, make sure that not too much water is going through. So this is the finished greenhouse. It's been about a year since we finished everything, so we've had one season's worth of vegetables that we grew in here. It actually gets very hot, so once it starts getting warm in the season, it's really too warm for most plants to be in here. You can see that there are some plants in here, but it really is too hot for some of them. You can see the floor that's finished pea gravel with the paving stones in the middle. We've got some shelves. The back wall is a paneling. That's not really real wood, it's a wood paneling. You can see the fan, which is attached to a thermostat. The thermostat is set to around 80 or 85, so that's when the fan comes on. A few things that we learned along the way. The inside is all painted with exterior paint. I really wish that we had running water inside the greenhouse, but we run a hose over to water the plants, and it's really important because the inside gets really wet when the plants are being watered. So it's important to have exterior paint inside, and also just the conditions. The temperature fluctuates so much that the exterior paint is important that it doesn't deteriorate like interior paint might. Overall, the greenhouse is one of the most useful and attractive places in our yard. It ended up probably costing a couple $1,000s to finish it up with lumber, but we really were able to save a lot of money by using old windows, by using some lumber that we were able to get cheaply, and by using pieces and parts that we were able to get for free. So that's it. Hope you've enjoyed the process of seeing the greenhouse come to life. Building from scratch with old windows is a great way to go and gives you the product that you really fits your needs. I'm Jason Wiedel. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks.